this one. Okay. That we are working with, we used mics last week, we're working with these microphone stands tonight, so it may be a little bit of a process of adjustment of leaning in. So just let us know. The board had several written communications since our last meeting on the 13th, and I'll take them roughly in order, date order. The first one was from Maureen Micah, suggesting that we use the October 11th Professional Development Day as a regular school day to partially make up for the 2 school days that we have used as bad weather days. And Mr. Phillips responded to her that we have rather few professional development days built into the schedule, one this year, but that of course, depending on what, that day is coming right up, but depending on what the weather does to us this winter, all options are open. We had an email from Zdenko Gorican, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, on student issue, which has been referred to the appropriate administrator. Obviously, we cannot discuss specific student issues because there are privacy concerns. We had an email from Greta Sawa about the posting of the middle school honor roll, and the response was that the middle school honor roll for the 3rd quarter was posted. There were some problems with grade discussions involving the 4th quarter, but that honor roll will be posted in the space across from the guidance office. We had a note from Felice Bittenbender noting that the success of the Asian American Association's first picnic and the fact that that was covered in BaristaNet. So if you haven't seen that, it was a beautiful day. The food was delicious. I think that's the essence of the BaristaNet article. We had an email from Amanda McCabe on the issue that we've discussed previously in this forum about conflicts between the council's meeting agenda and ours. That is something that's still being worked on. We generally put out our agenda for the entire calendar year in December. We have received the council's agenda as well, and so we are working on making as few conflicts as possible. And also, we had an email from Sally Patanga suggesting making masks mandatory during recess to reduce the number of quarantine cases and streamline contact tracing. And in that, as in all things, we take our orders from both executive orders by the governor and, most important, by consultation with the local Department of Health. And that is in accordance with the guidance that we get from the New Jersey State Department of Education, which is that knowing that different localities have different issues, that the local Department of Health is the best group to advise us day to day, and that is what happens. So that is public correspondence. Going on to the President's report. It's mostly about the changes, the evolving world of COVID. Right now, the governor, as you know, gives press conferences every Monday and Wednesday, giving the number of cases, the availability of vaccines, all of those things. The number of cases is declining somewhat. There is a lot of attention given to the approval of the Pfizer booster, and that has been widely reported in the press. The most pressing concern among people in the school universe is something that fortunately in Glen Ridge we don't have as much problem with, which is the lack of availability of bus drivers. There are shortages across the state in all areas of school employees, from teachers, lunch aides, bus drivers, et cetera. But because the qualifications for school bus driving are very exacting, we were already before COVID having a shortage of school bus drivers in the state. We're having an even greater shortage now, which has forced districts to rearrange their schedules and their opening times. The governor estimated today there are 7,000 students in the state who are being affected by the shortage of bus drivers. So they are working on that. There is attention being paid in the legislature to the current teacher shortages, looking for ways to get more teachers out into schools, and there have been a lot of suggestions. Part of the reason why we have a teacher shortage is COVID, but also because in New Jersey, in an effort to create the best possible teaching force, we've also created a number of impediments to entering the teaching force, especially for those who come from a disadvantaged background, are the first in their family to go to college, et cetera. So I think that the state in the future will be working on that. The most recent suggestion that's been batted around in Trenton for addressing teacher shortages is to temporarily ease the rules for retired teachers so that they could come back temporarily into the labor force and not be penalized in terms of their pensions. So that is something that may be discussed in the lame duck session of the legislature, which is happening, starts right after the election and continues until the new legislature is sworn in January. So that is the president's report, and now we will go to the superintendent's report.
Thank you. I'm going to start off by student recognition. We have 4 students, and I'm pleased to announce that were named National Merit semifinalists. I'm going to ask them to come up. Shu, Mia, who I know is not here today, Evan, and Tyler. Just to give you a little background on the achievement here, the National Merit semifinalists are determined by their PSAT scores. Over 1 million students during the school year will take the PSATs, and only 1% of those students earn this recognition. From here, they have an opportunity to fill out an application, and based on the completeness of their application and their SAT scores, they could become a National Merit finalist or a National Merit Scholar. So we're hoping that those 4 individuals will pursue that next level of achievement. I do have to promote some social media in district. The first is Mr. White. If you guys don't know Mr. White, he's currently, he moves around a lot, 5th grade teacher at Ridgewood Avenue School. Has written a number of children's books. His book, Night Books, became a movie on Netflix, which it's currently featured. So if you haven't seen it, please take the time and support Mr. White. It's a terrific movie, and congratulations to him. We do have the Glen Ridge Twitter account. If you'd like to follow that, I typically try to give updates on a daily basis. Some of it about school achievement, some about information from the Department of Ed. And lastly, I'm going to talk about is the high school has started an Instagram page. So please follow them at GRHS Ridgers for the latest news, highlights about activities, athletics, student achievement. I believe they put the daily announcements up there and information from our guidance. And of course, every school has a Facebook page and a lot of information usually provided by the home and school and the principal. So we encourage you to follow us through social media. I'm sharing our pandemic numbers with you. So right now, we've had some cases which have led to quarantines in the various buildings, and this is something we're closely monitoring. Right now, about half of the state is, when you look at the Cali level, half the state is at a high-risk level. Our region is still at a moderate level. We're paying close attention to those numbers. we are getting a lot of questions about quarantines and concerns about quarantines, and I just want to reinforce that we are following procedures and the advice and the recommendation of the New Jersey Department of Health, and we're working with our local health department in determining who needs to be quarantined and for how long. This has been a painstaking process for the administrators and for the school nurses. They are spending hours interviewing parents, trying to understand all possible contacts that the positive student may have had to make sure that those students are not coming to school and putting others at risk. We all want the children to be here in the buildings, but we also want to make sure we're maintaining a safe environment. So if you happen to get that call, please cooperate with whoever's calling you, whether it's the administrator, whether it's the school nurse. That information is shared with the local health department. We're working with them then to make a final determination what is going to happen. On the numbers I'm sharing with you currently, they do not reflect what happened this past weekend. This past weekend, we've had 4 individuals at Forest Avenue who have tested positive and 1 individual at the high school. So we're continuing to make sure our protocols are in place. We're tightening up some protocols. One of the aspects that we started the year, we were hoping to be provide the students a little bit more of a normal experience, if you can call that, in today's world. But at this point, as we're seeing some numbers increase, we're going to start developing some policies that will help us monitor what's going on in the school buildings. At this time, we still have not had an in-school transmission that we're aware of. Most of the positive COVID cases we can track to social or family events that obviously are happening outside of school. So please be aware of that. The protocols and safety practices that we're enforcing at school, hopefully they can be followed as best as possible when the students are outside of school, because we are seeing cases increase a little bit more than what we have experienced in the past. Along those lines, Governor Murphy had the executive order that all staff or school employees, whether they're employed by the school or they're outside vendors who work with the students regularly, have to be vaccinated by October 18th. If they are not vaccinated, then they're required to have ongoing COVID testing at least once or twice a week. Currently, I have gathered evidence that 90% of our staff is vaccinated. We are setting up a testing protocol. Part of that is the state has developed a program where they will have a vendor come in and do on-site COVID testing, and that should be happening by the middle of October. So some district initiatives I just want to keep you abreast of. First of all, we do have the equity audit that has been completed. It was completed late last spring, early summer. And tonight we have Dr. Diana Artis here from the Olive Branch Educators to present their findings and recommendations, and she'll present a little bit later. We are working on a special education audit, and currently they have reviewed the student IEPs, and they are now focusing on meeting with parents, special education parents, and soon afterwards they will be meeting with school employees, and from there they will come in and observe some classes and IEP meetings. We expect that process to last about 3 months. The next initiative we have is the strategic planning, and that has started. We are putting together a core team. Their first meeting is October 6th, and we will be putting out a public survey for parents, students, and staff members to get the data as we move forward in that process. And just to give you a little bit more understanding, of what will happen during that process, and I'll share this information with the public in a more organized letter that explains it. But you can see the topics of the 6 sections that we're going through with the core team, and relying on the information that's collected and working with the Board of Ed as we go through that process, and the administrative staff. And sorry, we have a lot going on here. Some updates. I do want to recognize that the GRPAAA event that happened September 5th, which was 18th, which was a picnic. It went over very well. I know some staff members and board members and administrators attended the event. I heard a lot of positive feedback. Tomorrow starts Start Strong at the high school. Start Strong is a new state assessment. And students at the high school in grades 7 through 12 will be taking various topics depending on your grade level. And later in October, students in grades 4 through 6 will be taking the State Strong assessment, Start Strong assessment. The last board meeting, there was a question about conflicting meetings between the town council and the Board of Ed. The two groups have exchanged their draft calendar dates. We're trying to work through some conflicts, but the situation would be much better than it has been in the past couple of years. So thank you for pointing that out, and we're doing what we can to make sure we have limited conflicts for the upcoming year. I want to give you an update on Ida. We've had a number of issues that popped up with that storm that we're still dealing with. Mostly at Ridgewood Avenue School, the lower gym floor will need to be replaced, and we're working through that process. We know how long construction projects like that might take with materials delay, working with our insurance company and finding a vendor that would complete the job to the proficiencies that we are seeking. The computer room also by the lower gym needed some repair done to the walls, so that hopefully will be completed by the end of this week. And the other big item, but not the only item, but the other big item is there was some blacktop damage done at Central School that's that will need to be repaired, and that's on the playground. That area has been cordoned off for the time being. And before we have our presentation, I did want to talk about some of the equity work that has been completed through this year, and we're starting through last year, and we're starting this year. We have a number of different activities that have been completed, and we will continue to work throughout this year. I'm pleased with where what we've accomplished so far. But there's still a lot more to do. So one of the activities we did last year when we had some concerns about some of the experiences that the middle school students had, we did host a meet with the parents, and we spoke about the experiences that their children have had, and I think that was a terrific experience for the staff that were present at that time, and we're going to continue to have those meetings at the different buildings, just so we can get a little bit more insight of what our students are experiencing. We have developed a text guideline or novel guideline, so when we adopt novels, we want to make sure that they're fitting within the format that we want. We want to make sure that we're offering diverse experiences in our novels, that we're looking at timelines, that we're looking at different genres. So this would just give us a better way of monitoring what's happening as far as the novels that are assigned. We have added language into our handbooks at the high school just to really stress the importance of that we will not, that derogatory terms will not be accepted at any time during on school grounds or at a school event. And we made that very clear with that statement. I've talked about the equity committee a number of times, and that's been a very productive group for us last year, and we have started to meet again this year. So we're having those initial discussions as we start to plan out the rest of this year. Every year, the district has to come up with a district improvement plan, and that will trickle down to the teachers, where they have to come up with professional development plans. We typically will have one district professional growth plan, and then the teachers will decide on one or two other professional growth plans. So this year we are focusing a little bit, we are focusing our district professional growth plan on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have provided a number of professional development opportunities for our staff last year. They happened in a variety of modes. Some of it was online. Some of it happened during faculty meetings. We had an opportunity to bring in some outside speakers. And this, we will continue that this year. We are already looking at our October 11th date, our professional development date, and looking to bring in a speaker to talk on the topic of DEI. The last three events up there, we did purchase classroom books for every elementary homeroom and distribute them. So we want to make sure that our classroom library sets are offering diverse selections for our students. So we made sure that every classroom library at least had some selections. We did revise the middle school reading novels, and that was really a long discussion with our language arts teachers, with our literacy consultants and our administration, and taking a look at what we're doing in the classroom a little bit differently, and finding ways to offer more experiences, and perhaps moving away from assigning a lot of novels and just assigning a couple novels, but incorporating more short stories so students can be exposed to different types of writing. And what I mentioned at our last Board of Ed meeting, when we looked at our staff that we hired this year, it was, from what I remember, and I've been here for a number of years, probably the most diverse staff that has come in. We had 35% of our new hires came from a diverse background, and when we started looking at the certified staff, which would include teachers, guidance counselors, child study team members, we were at 30% of those individuals. Typically, if you look at our history in the last 5 years, our entire staff, we're running about 10% of our staff members being diverse. So we're trying to take that step forward to make sure that we're offering that we're trying to create a more diverse experience, because it's a better experience for all our students. And with that said, I just want to talk a little bit about the education audit, the equity audit. At the start of last year, we started talking about performing an equity audit, and we went out and found a vendor. We ended up having Olive Branch Educators as our vendor. In the spring, they performed a number of tasks, which include surveys to our school community, focus groups for our school communities, and looking at our curriculum and some of our practices. And they ended up writing a report, and here to share their findings and recommendations based on their observations is Dr. Diana Artis, who is the CEO of Olive Branch Educators.
Okay, can you hear me now? Great. So it's great to be here with you all. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share. Yes, my team and I started working with the school spring and into the summer, and it was great working with them. They were very welcoming, very supportive. They made the work easy for us. The other thing that I think is really important to stress is that when you do an audit like this, you're obviously looking to identify any challenges that may exist in the community and make recommendations about how to remediate. And often, folks can be defensive as they receive the feedback, and did not experience that at all with the administrators with whom we worked. And so that was very encouraging. They listened, they took in the report. It's pretty extensive. It's about 60 pages, lots of charts and graphs. And then we met a second time after they had an opportunity to digest it to talk. Is this better? Sorry, thank you, Winnie. To make sure that we could answer any questions that they might have. So what I'm going to do now is just kind of give you an overview of who we spoke with, who we surveyed, and then share the themes. We came up with 7 major themes and the recommendations. Okay. So we received survey responses from 475 parents. 65 high school students responded to the survey, 76 employees. And the biggest takeaway that we found, well, and then we did focus groups. We had focus groups for faculty and staff, focus groups for students, which weren't really well represented, which was curious. That's unusual. Our experience in schools are that the high school students are eager to talk, but that wasn't the case here. We don't know why. And then parents. We had quite a few parent focus groups. Great representation and a lot of feedback. The one thing that I do want to also stress as I share the results is that these are people's lived experiences. And these are the experiences of those who completed the survey. So we never know why people don't. We had several folks open multiple reminders, look at the survey several times, but never actually completed it, which is not unusual. That happens. But we can't really interpret that, but I just want to share that. So the information that we do have, that we are sharing, is based on those who shared their experience. And we can't question someone's experience. We have to accept it as being true for them and try to understand it and then move forward. Everyone, regardless of what they shared, did feel great about the community, loved being a part of Glen Ridge, and we're just eager to have these changes put in place. Okay, so the first theme was communication. Parents conveyed concern that clear, consistent messages about what's happening at the school have not been delivered in a way that they would like. And why this is a DEI issue is because you have non-traditional families, if you will. So we have families that are divorced, we have families where grandparents may be in charge, et cetera. And so their experience, those who responded to the survey, is that the communication only goes out to one member of a family. And that sends a message that the family as a whole is not being accepted. They use the survey administration as an example of that, their experience. The survey link, several folks said only went to one person, not to 2 households. The focus groups they did not feel were well advertised, so they found out about it, from friends. So, you know, we kind of had an in the moment, if you will, experience of their frustration with the survey. And so that extends to other areas, and we know that in order to have a diverse, inclusive, equitable, welcoming community, when we have people with different backgrounds, different experiences, communication is really important. So we really want to make sure that everyone is receiving the communication about what's happening in the school. The second area of concern was cultural competency. And the parent survey responses and focus groups indicated that there is a great concern among parents about the cultural competency of the staff. This was in the area of race, ethnicity, but also gender. We had parents of girls who spoke about, particularly at the middle school level, that their girls were not being as supported or as empowered as the boys, perhaps. And then parents of children with special needs also spoke about the fact that they would love to see more competency in that area on the part of the teachers to support their children. Okay, curriculum, and your superintendent just spoke to this, but curriculum was also a big topic. A lot of concern about information that's being presented in terms of textbooks, in terms of expectations, in language arts in particular. And we went through and looked at all of the books that were being offered to students, as was reflected on the website. And we did see that there is room to improve in terms of presenting books by people of color, books by women, books about different topics that relate to DEI, so different family combinations, the LGBTQ community, different religious backgrounds, and that the narrative should not just be kind of a deficit model, if you will, so just books about the Holocaust or books about slavery. Not that they're not important, but also our students need to see people that look like them doing things that are successful, having a sense of agency, and so a real call for that. We also, to support the findings, did an audit of the language arts curriculum at two neighboring public schools, so the Montclair Public School System and South Orange, to compare with what is being offered at Glen Ridge. And definitely, if we use those other schools as a model, there is area for growth. Now, it sounds like some changes have been put in place that we just heard this evening, but definitely an area where parents would like to see more. And not just the material, but also the discussions that support it in the classroom. Feeling they would love teachers to be more comfortable in terms of the language that they use, how they discuss the topics. Several examples of using kind of inappropriate language, if you will, and not in the form of slur, but just the way in which they present things. So for example, if you're presenting something around World War II, and you're talking about the good old days, being careful about what that means. So good old days for whom? So really creating the cultural competency of the teachers, really having the teachers kind of examine their own personal perspective that they bring to the material, which could be sending messages that they don't intend to send. So no one was suggesting that anyone was malicious in any way. This is really about education. And when we do consulting and training in DEI, what we like to say is that it's not about being good or bad people. It's really about learning a skill, so kind of like another language. So using these books, teach them in a way that's accessible to all, and making sure that there's space in the classroom for students to see themselves. Okay, the next theme, diversity, which we heard a little bit about. So definitely a huge concern is the lack of diversity in the employees in the Glen Ridge school system. A lot of research shows that, ego identity development, racial identity development are linked in terms of success. So in a nutshell, students need to see people who look like them doing the things that they do in order to feel a sense of agency. And so that is missing. For many students who do not identify as white, they can go through their career here and not have the opportunity to be taught by a teacher that looks like them. And so that's really important. And I guess a way to think about it, we always say to flip it to test it. So if your child is seeing for most of the day teachers that look like them, consider what it might be like if they did not. So that's a concern that was raised by parents, and that is something that the school is addressing. We know that it is challenging, but it sounds like they are, working to address that. The fifth theme was monitoring academic success. So parents of children with special needs, or IEPs, had a lot to say in this area. So feeling as though the school is not supporting them in a way that they would like. So it sounds like there's a disconnect. They have the IEP, they don't feel like it's being implemented to the benefit of their student, and so they'd like to have more conversation, more transparency about that's happening. And in terms of the students of color, where that shows up, there's some question about how students are identified for advanced placement classes, honors classes, some sharing anecdotes that a student may have the grade point average, but for some reason is not being admitted into the honors class. So a lot of conversation about that, wanting to have a little bit more transparency and consistency around academic success. Parental agency, another interesting theme. And this is consistent, across schools, public, private, charter. I've worked in a lot of different schools. But there is this sense that those who are involved in the home school association, they have a greater sense of agency than others. So they feel as though the leadership in the home school, HSA, have better connections. They can walk into the administrator's office. They can request certain teachers. And that's a real concern for them. We had a great deal of conversation about, okay, well, have you tried to access this organization? Have you tried to participate? And we had several parents that took us through the steps that they put in place to become members of the association, and we're not able to. So feeling as though there are some stumbling blocks, some barriers for equal access. So definitely something to look to. And because organizations like that tend to be the ambassador of the school community, it really is important for them to think about this, think about what they're offering, the programs, when the meetings are being held. Are they during the workday? Are they on the evening? Creating greater access for parents so that they can feel included. And then the last thing is value of DEI. So definitely school personnel feel as though it is valued. Parents that we spoke to, not so sure. I mean, theoretically, yes, but they look to some of the things that we've just identified as an argument against that. So really raising a question of whether or not DEI, which stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion, is valued in the community. And what I think is really at the root of that is this ability to move from theory to practice. So obviously the school is committed to that. They wouldn't spend money and resources to have, firms like myself coming in, the things that were just shared a little while ago. But the disconnect comes in how well we are moving from the theoretical realm to application, which speaks to the curriculum, discussions in the classroom, and some of the other things that we've mentioned. So those were kind of the highlights in terms of concerns. And then the recommendations that were related to those are as follows. Okay. So in terms of communication, we definitely spoke about thinking about other ways to share reports, information with the larger community, certainly definitely sharing this report with the community, which we're doing now, finding more culturally inclusive ways to share information. It looks like it's happening, streaming, recording, social media. So just looking at ways to improve communication. Cultural competency, we definitely recommended DEI training at all levels of staff, beginning with basic concepts. So things like biases, microaggression, gender education. So again, it's not that we're bad people. There's a lot of science that talks about how our brains are wired. So just becoming aware of it, paying attention to that. And as we're teaching our students to really be cognizant of how we bring our own perspective into the space and how it might negatively impact the work we're trying to achieve. So ongoing professional development, accountability for cultural competency, and then voluntary education for parents. So there's often a disconnect in many ways between parents and school, and I'm a parent myself. My kids are just graduated college, so just empty nester now. But so I get that as a parent, right? Sometimes there's a disconnect between the two. And so it would be helpful if schools offered voluntary DEI education for parents so that they are able to participate in these conversations with their student. So some schools do it in terms of book clubs, discussion groups, but really just providing the tools to our parents that the students are acquiring in the school day. Curriculum. So we talked about offering professional development regarding curriculum design. So having an actual K through 12 DEI curriculum map. So when a student graduates from Glen Ridge, you have identified what are the skills that you want them to achieve. This is not just important in terms of any sort of global sense, which I'm sure you're probably hearing from college counselors, is that the college scene has changed significantly. College essays, college interviews, DEI is no longer an option, and we're not talking about how someone looks. What is required is your ability to speak to the topics, to answer essay questions, because they are looking for students who are going to be equipped to be in the classroom with lots of different people. So a school district like this, which is highly regarded, you definitely want to make sure that you've identified some basic DEI skills that you want your students to have when they graduate, along with their other skills. Looking at curriculum, so more frequent curriculum revisions, and then looking at what peer schools are doing just to kind of be in the loop, and so we shared some of that. Diversity, so looking at hiring practices, prioritizing hiring staff of color and other marginalized groups. perhaps establishing a DEI director position to have some accountability. I know there's a team, so that's great. So providing ongoing training for the team that exists. And then monitoring academic success. So greater transparency about the supports that are available for students with special needs and IEP, increased collaboration between parents and faculty around the students, and then providing professional development for faculty to support students who have special needs and or IEPs. Parental agency, requiring DEI training for the HSA leadership. Again, they're volunteers and they're learning like the rest of us. So it may benefit them to have some DEI training so they can support the members of the community. Provide inclusive and culturally sensitive meetings. So thinking about when it's offered, the day of the week, et cetera. And providing transparency about the roles and leadership within the HSA. Some new families don't really know what it is. They don't know how to access it. They don't know what they do. So providing transparency there. And then the last thing, supporting the value of DEI in Glen Ridge District, training for board members, communication from board members to the community about DEI goals and objectives, regular updates about DEI, some of which we heard this evening, and then cultural competency required component as part of employee evaluation so that there's some form of accountability. So those are the themes and recommendations.
Thank you, Dr. Artis, for that very comprehensive overview. It's now time for questions and comments. I will open it up first to my board colleagues and then to the audience. When it is time for the audience to speak, we have a few basic rules for public session that we apply all the time, which is that if you want to speak, if you have a comment, please come to the lectern in the middle where you have a microphone. Give us your name, confirm your Glen Ridge residency. If you are a resident, give us any professional affiliation you have if you're here representing a group, and then give us your comments. Everyone is limited to 2 minutes in this first public comment session, which is on agenda items. There is a second public comment session at the end of the meeting, also for agenda items or other items pertaining to the running of the schools. And so those are our basic rules. I time all the speakers on my clock feature of my phone, so I am the one who gives the warning if you're exceeding the 2 minutes. So first, let's go ahead and see if board members have any questions or comments. Heather.
Dr. Artis, could you speak to the social studies curriculum? I know you had suggestions about language arts. Is the social studies curriculum addressing DEI? Is it like integrated or siloed? If you could talk about that.
Yeah, so definitely there could be greater integration in social studies curriculum. The other thing that we noticed there is that there's not necessarily a strategic path of growth in developing skills to discuss the social studies content, kind of a moving around. So, for example, I think there's like a middle school diversity club, or there is a club and some middle school students were not allowed to participate. However, some of the books that they're reading are dealing with those topics, or that younger children are reading are dealing with the topics. So it speaks to the K-12 mapping that if you really identify what the skills are, then you can align your social studies curriculum and your language arts curriculum so that it moves in stages and supports students. There's not a lot of exposure, as the parents reported, in social studies to different experiences. And the experiences that are shared are often negative, and so looking for more positive experiences about people in our country.
Could you also you mentioned DEI skills. Could you give an example or two?
So in terms of the skills for the teachers and for students is really identifying how our biases impact how we interpret things. So one example that I like to give that's fairly relevant is that last year, I believe it was last year, I'm losing track of time, was the 100th anniversary of women's right to vote. Okay, but not all women have been voting for 100 years. So women of color have not had the right to vote for 100 years. So if you stand up in a classroom and say, we're going to celebrate women's right to vote, and there are girls of color, women of color in your classroom, you are essentially ignoring their experiences, the experiences of their ancestors. So that's what we mean about skill, is that there's nothing in that statement that makes you a bad person. It's just being aware, oh my gosh, this is my perspective. And so as I'm presenting information, I need to think about how it's being presented. Is it being presented in an inclusive way? So a great, conversation is, yeah, there was the right to vote for women. However, there are women who did not enjoy that privilege and some who still don't, and the reasons why. So that's kind of an example, identifying our biases as we present information. Another skill is microaggression. So I was excited to hear about the language in the handbook. I haven't looked at that. But that's an example, like what are we saying? What are some phrases that we're using, some words that we're using that are creating harm that we don't intend to? So it's really like this diversity stuff is messy and complicated. Like it sounds great in theory, but it's kind of like how do we bring everybody together and achieve the goal, the educational goals, and in the process, allow every student to bring all of whom they are to the setting. And so the skills are, identifying blind spot, learning language, critical thinking, microaggression, learning history. Does that help at all?
Yes.
Other questions or comments from the board?
No, I was just going to ask, is the full report going to be put up on our website?
Yes, it will be.
Thank you, and thank you very much for your work.
Sure, absolutely, my pleasure.
Other questions? Teresa, did you ever?
Thank you for your, oh, sorry about that. Ooh, is this on? Can you hear it okay? Thank you for your time and your staff as well. Do you have suggestions for finding additional personnel in the area? That can be a real challenge, and we are always looking to find out more resources to create a diverse work group.
So yeah, there are several organizations and places where you can go to recruit faculty of color, faculty or teachers of diverse backgrounds, marginalized identities. What's often the roadblock in that process is the hiring practice itself. And so we will work with organizations to help them unpack bias that exists in their hiring process. So that begins with how you're advertising, how you're interviewing, what your protocol is for making decisions about who to hire or not to hire. And sometimes just those tweaks in and of itself will change things. So you want to have a very deliberate and strategic approach to your hiring for a period of time, and then it runs itself. So what's important is sending a message that the Glen Ridge School District is one that is interested in increasing the diversity of their teachers. Once that message is there, then you will have folks who are interested and who will apply when positions are posted. So there are folks of color who are looking for teaching positions. They do exist, and they do have the qualifications. It's really the process that institutions go through in terms of seeking them out. There are universities in the area where you can make connections. So there are some things in that way, strategic things. I worked with a school where they had a hiring fair, so they invited folks from surrounding universities to come, spend a day on campus, meet folks on campus, hear what's happening in terms of DEI, so that they're sending a message as kind of marketing, this is important to us, this is what we're doing. And even if that moment, if there is not a viable candidate or there's not an opening that matches the candidates who are available, you're building a connection. So this has to be very deliberate, very strategic, and it will happen. It's looking at what's on your website. So there are many things, many ways to tackle this, which go beyond just saying where's the kind of the pipeline for these folks. Does that make any sense?
That's helpful. Yeah, it's challenging always, but if you have suggestions in terms of soliciting more candidates, that would be very welcome.
Yeah, because it's really not. We just tweak a few things and you'd be surprised. But again, it's that perspective that we talk about, right? It's having to kind of shift one's perspective. Who are we looking for? So if you look at a resume, right? So some of the work is, okay, why are you selecting this person to interview versus that person? What are some of the things that you see that are attractive to you that might not be attractive to someone else? What are the questions that are being asked? You know, do we have a standard set of questions that everybody is asked in the interview, as well as those questions where we just kind of, happen organically? You look at a resume, you see someone went to the same institution you went to, right away there's a connection, bias is set in, there's confirmation bias as you move down. They suddenly in your mind to move to another level than someone else who might have a very different experience. Just being aware of that can be really helpful in terms of sifting through resumes and inviting people in to interview.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Anthony?
Just a quick question. I don't recall in all of the questioning if there was a breakdown of the respondents that you got. I'd just like to unpack that a little bit and see. Just
Can you say more? What do you mean by the breakdown of the
I
respondents?
mean, like by gender, race, culture.
Mhm.
'Cause
Yeah, we
there-
have that information.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
Yep.
That's in the report, correct?
Mhm. Yes. There are lots of charts and graphs in the report that speak to that.
Jocelyn?
Could you speak to what our response rate to the surveys and the participation levels that you saw across our district, how it compares to other districts that you've worked with, and what it suggests to you about our engagement with DEI issues?
Yes, so parent response was great in terms of the focus groups and even the survey. It was pretty decent. The response of the employees was a little disappointing. So not a great deal of response there, either in the surveys and also the focus groups. Now, the focus groups, we offered them during the day and the evening to try and accommodate work schedules, because, they're teaching. But we didn't get a lot of folks participating in those focus groups, mostly administrators, not a lot of teachers. And the other area that was not concerning, but was surprising, were the high school students. So we often find high school students are eager to talk about this. And certainly in the survey responses, we did see some comments. But it is curious why they did not participate in the focus groups. Now, it could be kind of the comfort with having the conversation. It could be that this is really new. I think there's some of that in there. So even some of the specific anecdotes that we listed in the survey, not all of them, but some of them, do suggest to me where our community is on the spectrum. And so I think that this is a community, respectfully saying, who's at a different place than maybe other communities. So certainly with some of the things that are in place now, I would expect that if you did the survey again, say a year or two from now, you might have more participation, certainly from students. So I think it's really comfort. Some of the students did share, kind of anxiety about, repercussions, that sort of thing. I think of the students who did come to focus groups, they were middle schoolers, so that was really cute.
Is it possible that COVID affected the turnout or participation rate, do you think, or no?
No.
Okay, board, anything else? All right, that being the case, it is now time for public comment within the parameters that I outlined earlier. As I said, come to the lectern, give us your information, and give us your public comment. I think you're the first one. It's always the hardest to be the first one.
Thank you. Okay. Mark Cunningham, 8 Hillside. I want to thank Dr. Artist and the board for a lot of hard work on this. I have to say, I'm just going to speak for what I think is a lot of people who have considerable concerns about this. Very glad you brought in some voices that hadn't been heard before. especially the special education parents. Sorry, I'm tearing up now.
It's okay.
But I do worry that we're hearing one set of ideas about what diversity, inclusion, et cetera, mean, that these are very fraught concepts, which, you know, in many cases across the country have meant questionable reforms, including the ending of some advanced classes or the reduction in gifted classes. And I don't think people want that in this town. We want to make things better for everyone. I'm concerned also that you begin with noting the communication problems about the whole process, which means that what we heard was, it was very important to hear what you heard, but that meant that the people who were most, it was a selection of perhaps the most upset or the most concerned or just whatever. It means that your findings don't reflect, all you can do is give voices to some experiences. It doesn't give us any sense of a collective experience. And I just fear that, I mean, we're already taking books off the reading list as part of this program. Admittedly, to make room for other books or short stories that should be there, and I get that you have to make choices, but this is concerning, I think, to many in the community. And I just wanted to share those concerns, to urge more openness and transparency about what might be, I'll call it taken away as given, or what all of the choices we're making here, because all these steps should be made very carefully, with a concern for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening. Carol Florzak, parent of a first grader at Central School and president of the Central School HSA. First, thank you for your findings. Certainly very interesting to hear. If I could, I wanted to add on to just some commentary around the question that was asked about hiring. My background, so you'll have to indulge me a little bit, is I have 20 plus years of experience in recruitment and hiring. Also sat on diversity and inclusion boards at some major organizations. So this is kind of my wheelhouse. It's one thing to certainly get diverse hires into the door, but I think there's also an equally important conversation that needs to be had about the support that is provided for those individuals once they are on board. Because if they don't feel supported, or if they don't feel that these other components are in place, they will leave. So I want to make sure that, you know, it's very clear, you can hire all you want, but you're gonna have a ton of turnover if these other components are not put in place, you know, either before or in conjunction with these individuals coming on board. So if we truly wanna make sure that these folks come in, are successful, get into those leadership levels so that there can in fact be more representation, equal attention needs to be paid to those areas as well. My point is that they just go hand in hand. So, sorry, I don't know why my voice is so shaky. I'm used to public speaking, but sorry, that's all.
Okay, thank
Thank
you,
you.
and your point is heard and taken by all of us. Okay, next.
Hello,
Hi.
Tricia Akinwandi, parent of a 7th grader in this school. Dirk, thank you. Betsy and board, thank you for making DEI a priority. Thank you for soliciting and getting this equity audit done. Thank you, Dr. Ortiz, for doing the audit. My question is, as Michael asked, The results will be on the website, which is great, so everybody can peruse them and understand them. My question to you as administrators and the board, what are the next steps? What are the next steps you have in mind with all of this knowledge in which Dr. Ortiz has gathered, with the comments, with the organizations that have been brought together, with police, with GRPAA, with myself and my board members for GRBDIA? Curious to know what are the tangible next steps for the board and the administration. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll talk on that topic. There's a few steps as we're looking through and prioritizing the needs of the district, and this is I'll compare it to when we went through the security audit. Where, we hired an outside firm to come in, do an audit on our security features, and from that audit, they recognized some areas that needed improvement, and our job there then was to prioritize and work through the different recommendations. So we're going to be doing the same thing. When we're looking at the report and speaking with the equity committee, speaking with the board members, and speaking with administrators, we'll prioritize items that need to be done. And two of the items that really stick out for us that we've already started discussing is personnel and professional development for our teachers. So we want to make sure that we're creating classroom environments where everyone feels they belong and they're nurtured in those environments. And that's, so our focus this year is really going to be on professional development, and it's going to be looking at our hiring practices to make sure that we're bringing in the best people and making sure part of that process is that we're bringing hopefully in a more diverse staff, which we saw with the hires in this past summer.
And as several of you have mentioned, communication is key. So we will be reporting out on the efforts that Mr. Phillips just described. Other comments?
Hi, my name is, I'm very short, sorry. My name is Mary Ellen Cusmano. I'm a resident in Glen Ridge. I've had 4 students attend the Glen Ridge Public School, and I have a lot of experience in the district. I do realize that with somebody, and I do appreciate the work that was done by Olive Branch, but I do believe when we talk about bias, they came to the table with bias, okay? This isn't an organization that came to the table and did an audit. I haven't seen the numbers, I haven't seen the graphs, I have not seen the charts, but from my mathematical mindset and my experience as an auditor working in a bank, audits are done on financial statements related to finances. And we can do audits, but audits have to be very detailed, and they have to be very cognizant that what the results are or recommendations that are being made as a result of this. This is the first time we've even heard any of these results, and yet the board has already worked on a number of initiatives for DEI. So I also had the DEI organization where I work for women. So I'm very clear too, and I want to be very articulate about what I'm saying here. In an audit, you have to have numbers. So in order to make a recommendation, you have to have numbers that back up what you're saying are your recommendations. And with very few taxpayers, and I mean full-fledged taxpayers participating in this, and I have to agree fully with Dr. Artis that communication is a real problem, because most of the Board of Education is taking advantage of the fact that most parents don't even know what's going on. So most parents in the school district don't know there are any of these initiatives, and most parents in the school district work full-time to make sure they can keep their kids in a school district like this, and they don't have time to do all this follow-up. And I really think that it's very, very important that when we share information, we call it what it is objectively. It was a survey, and the survey was taken with predetermined questions. The predetermined questions had 4 numeric answers. You could put text to the answers as well. So what do you do with the text information that you came up with from those?
Mary Ellen, you're at 2 minutes.
Okay, so I just want to know what we are doing, why we have recommendations without knowing what the results of the audit are, and I expect to get an answer.
Thank you. With regard to going ahead with an audit, when we were already engaged in some of the work covered by the audit, I think the engagement that we undertook prior to the audit is what led us to the conclusion that an audit might be helpful to us. An audit is an excellent tool, and so our efforts led to this. With regard to the findings themselves, as we said, they will be published on our website so that people can look at them, so that people can evaluate them in their own time, in their own way, so that they can move forward with us as we think about how we implement some or all of those recommendations. This is a process, and it is an ongoing process. It does not begin with the audit. It will not end when Dr. Artis leaves us tonight. It is an ongoing process of growth in the district. Other comments?
Joe Patrone. I think many of you know me. Hello again. Hi. I don't even know where to begin in a way. My kids, both of my children, both of my boys have gone through the school system, and this school system has been a magnificent place for them to grow and learn and experience things. So I live by two rules in my life. The one of them, though, is that I treat people exactly as I want to be treated. So if you treat me well, I'll treat you well, and if you don't treat me well, I won't treat you well. Thank you, though, and I'll get to more of that, but thank you for asking more about the statistics, Anthony, because I was wondering, 475 out of about how many, what were the demographics of that, and all of that kind of stuff, because I want to know that there's a good sample size, right? I want to make sure that the sample is, coherent. I want to make sure it's the right thing. Now, treating people the way I like to be treated, I think it would be a lot better. I have nothing wrong, no problem with diversity, but I think we'd be a lot better off if we just started talking to people as people. I don't care what you look like, or you look like, or he looks like. I just don't care. Did you ever see the movie Hidden Figures? Do you think John Glen, when he was going to go up in that rocket, do you think he cared who was on that team to try to get him back? Oh, no, wait a minute. I got to have diversity on that team. No. When Ben Carson was going to separate those two children, do you think those people cared about diversity? No, they didn't. Put the best person in the right place at the right time and just do it. Now, if I want to step back for a second, in 5 years or 6 years, 10 years, when my son is standing here, right, and you don't want to hire him because you want to hire some other diverse kid, well, wait a minute. Isn't that discrimination? Isn't that, that's the best form of racism I can see. I don't get it. I don't understand it. The other thing I always thought in my life, two wrongs don't make a right. So yes, we've had some issues in the past. I grew up in Jersey City, too. I saw so many darn different types of people. I couldn't care less. Treat people as I was always, as I was treated. That's what I was taught since I was a little kid. And it's never left me. And if you ask my two boys, they'll tell you that's one of my golden rules. So I don't have a problem with diversity. Diversity is great. But when you try to, I want you to be careful, like the other gentleman said, just be careful how you implement it. Think about it. Don't do ready, fire, aim or something, however that sentence goes. So thank you, though.
Thank you. I think that this is a thoughtful process. So thank you. Next.
Hi, thanks. My name is Yorina Mujica, Glen Ridge resident, have 2 children in the school system. Wanted to just first of all thank you for doing this audit, the assessment, the focus groups, and all of the work that's gone into this. Very much appreciate that you've already begun to really think about how to make some changes and made some, maybe low-hanging fruit in terms of the options for novels, et cetera. Was interested to recognizing that, it's going to take some time to assess the report, set goals, and make progress. Interested to hear what you're planning in terms of accountability metrics, in terms of measuring progress and measuring success in the next steps that you're putting forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want to address that?
Sure. Well, it depends on which topic when we're looking at the various subcategories of this. you know, when we're looking at personnel and if we're looking to diversify, and I want to assure people, our job is to bring in the best people. And part of that is making sure that we're widening our range of individuals, of possible candidates. And when we do that, we're going to get a more diverse candidate pool. So that should happen more naturally. And then we've gotten involved in more organizations as we're trying to find individuals for openings. So we've been very adamant to make sure that we're reaching out to a greater number of individuals to increase our candidate pool. So when we're looking at personnel, obviously those numbers are a little bit clearer to define, because we can start looking at our hires and see where we're at, and we're in our application process, so seeing how many individuals are applying and then how many of them come from a diverse background. When we're taking accountability, that's also looking at what we're doing in the classrooms, and some of that is a simple physical accountability. You walk in the classroom and you look at the posters in the classrooms and you see what's being displayed. Some of that is analyzing what's being read in the classroom. Are the heroes always from one group, or are the victims always from one group? So we want to start looking at what is being presented to the students. So those are different ways we're looking to look at accountability, but we also want to then also measure the academic progress of our subgroups when we look at our students. So those are things that we're going to be reviewing as we move forward.
I think in the way that Mr. Phillips has described, some of you have expressed concerns about excellence, on which we all pride ourselves in Glen Ridge. We believe that these efforts, that DEI is integral to excellence for all of our students. So that is always the goal. The two ideas are not mutually exclusive, they are mutually inclusive. Anyone else?
Most of you know who I am. I'm Vincent Cusimano. I live at 297 Ridgewood Avenue. Okay? I'm sickened by what's going on here. Our country was formed with we the people, not separate and divided subgroups. This survey, which is what it is, not an audit, promotes each focus group, taken, divides, and doesn't see people as individuals, as the previous person spoke of. I've never looked at anyone about their race, color, gender, anything like that. It's un-American, as you all know. And it sickens me to think that $25,000 of our tax dollars went to this charade where the answers were already dictated, okay, in my opinion. I run a small architectural firm, and my favorite saying is when I interview people, check your sex, gender, color at the door, okay? Because we see you as an individual on how you can contribute to our work, okay? And then one other thing is that I just can't get over how far this has gone already, and I agree with the rest of the people who have spoken. I'm not sure how many people know about this, and it sickens me again to know that it's gone as far as it has. We'd be all better off if we just worked with each other as a group of people, as Americans, instead of dividing each other all the time into these separate groups, which promotes one group over another, okay? It's reverse discrimination is what it's called. And I don't know how we've now decided to hire on quotas. That's what we're talking about, aren't we? We're not looking for the qualified people. We're just looking for quotas. Let's be honest here, folks. Let's stop promoting this conversation, as you put it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Other comments?
Can I respond?
Sure, Anthony, please.
The difficulty I have in listening to part of what you said and part of what the gentleman behind you said is that it does not take into account the history of this country the fact that the groups that are separated in this country, we're not separated by choice. There is a cultural problem here. That is not to say everyone has a problem. I don't know you, so I would never assume that you do have a problem. But societally, there are issues. And it becomes an issue when students are impacted by bias that people have. And bias is not racism. Let's be clear. Bias is not racism. Bias is just your cultural upbringing. I have biases. I'll be the first to say it. Everybody in this room has biases because of how we were brought up. I don't think that we are talking about quotas. And while I've been sitting on this board, I've never heard people talk about hiring people because of their race and ignoring their credentials. Never heard it. Because I don't want it. I don't. My kids go to school here too. There's a reason I moved here. And I respect what this town represents.
May I respond to this?
No. You've used your 2 minutes. Thank you.
So I'm not going to there are just certain things that one needs to be aware of culturally. Some things that you may not see. And it's not a fault. It's not a deficit. It's just different experiences. And I think what we're trying to do is understand the differences so that kids can grow up and feel the same way your kids felt. Sometimes that doesn't always happen here. So, you know, if you feel that this is you know, reverse discrimination, that's not what I'm looking for here. I'm looking to have, you know, there are people who live in this town that I've met who've told me stories about just slight things, which, you know, on the face of it don't mean much, but when their kids tell the stories, you don't know what the impact is. I'll ask you all, give it a chance, don't throw it all out now, and scrutinize it, because I'm going to. That's why I asked the question about the numbers. Our world is not the same as it was 30 years ago, 40 years ago. So we just want to try to reflect some of the changes we're seeing around us. If
Okay.
if you have, you know, issues, please come. Please, you know, I am open. I think the board is open. But I would request that we scrutinize the actions that come out of it before we criticize it. That's all I'll say.
And I would say that there was no predetermined result. That would have been a waste of taxpayers' money to have a predetermined result. We entered this audit in a spirit of inquiry, a desire for advice and suggestions. We all need to take our time, as Anthony said, and look at the result of the audit, and then enter into the conversation about the next steps. I think that, our founding fathers talked about forming a more perfect union. We are trying to found a more perfect school system. It's a wonderful school system. My daughter had a wonderful experience here. But you can always enlarge your thinking. You can always make things better. And that's the intention of this board. Other comments?
Hi there, my name is Sarah Skillette. I'm a resident of Glen Ridge. I have a graduate from Glen Ridge High School and a freshman at Glen Ridge High School, and I just wanted to say this is a painful conversation. It's painful for me as a white person to stand here and hear the level of kind of fear and defensiveness in some people's voices. And
If you lean into your microphone a little bit, I think that will help.
It's painful for me to hear some fear and defensiveness that people are experiencing. And I'd like to thank the board for doing this work and opening up the conversation, because it's very clear to me that there's work for us to do here to make sure that every kid has the same kind of great experience at Glen Ridge that my kids are having. So thank you for doing this work.
Thank you. Other comments?
Hi, my name is Christina Cosma. I live on Glen Ridge on Lincoln Street. I have to say I agree with the last speaker. This was an audit open to everyone to express their feelings, their experiences. Everyone was welcome to express theirs. The fact that minorities, racial minorities, religious minorities, just by virtue of expressing their opinion have elicited such hostility, I find disturbing. I am happy to hear the experiences of my neighbors who might not look like me, who might have different religions than me. My family has already noticed a couple of positive changes that I don't think are objectionable in any way. At the Jewish holidays, my son came home and said, "Hey, we don't have any homework. It's an important Jewish holiday." I know for the Jewish community this has been an issue in the past. It was brought up in the equity survey. I was pleased that that happened. I was pleased that my son was invited to express his opinion about a book, a middle school book that they read, that caused some, it used the N-word a lot. Some of the African-American kids really, including my son, didn't feel great about reading the book. His English teacher invited them to say, "Do you think it's a classic? Do you think we should read it? Why or why not? You read books over the summer. Should that be considered a classic? Did it have a more diverse perspective? What do you think? How should we choose these books?" I think that is invaluable. That invited my son and all the other students to have that experience. Those were excellent changes. I can't imagine listening to people and respecting them and causing them to have an increase in their intellectual inquiry could meet with any objection. And I appreciate hearing from all my neighbors with different backgrounds than myself. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments?
Hi, Lynella Gavin, 22 Hamilton in Glen Ridge. I have 2 children in the school system. I just wanted to say I do appreciate where you're coming from. I hear you. I hear that you have concerns. Just know that everyone else in town also had concerns with the survey, and we did express them, appreciated the fact that you accepted them and tried to adjust them. I really do truly appreciate the fact that the board is trying to do something different. And my experience with the school system is, everyone chose to be part of this bubble, right? And it truly is a bubble. And it's a fantastic school system. It's fantastic in so many different ways, but it's a bubble. And for me personally, I want my children to have our experiences expanded, to see different experiences, to hear about different cultures, because that's what they're going to get as soon as they leave Glen Ridge. And I think that's what the intent of this is. It's not to put favoritism on any class or any gender or any ethnicity. It's more about opening up our school system to allow more things in for our children to have greater experiences. And that's what I truly appreciate for what you're trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you. I would ask that when you speak, all the speakers, please speak to the board, address the board, not to each other. You have opportunities to do that at other places and times, but this is important that you address the board so that we can hear. Other comments?
Hi, Steve Lord, Herman Street, Glen Ridge. I have one child in the school, 7th grade. And I agree with a lot of these other people, have some grave concerns about this so-called survey. And, you know, I will wait to see what happens, you know, hold judgment. But I missed some meetings before, and I just want to go back to the masks. I wasn't clear, is there going to be masks now on recess as well?
At this time, we've not implemented a mandatory recess mask. One of the balance that we have is trying to provide students some mask breaks during the school day. So at this time, masks are optional at recess.
Okay, I think that's a good thing, because I think the masks shouldn't exist at all. There's been many studies that show the masks are worthless for kids, and they actually do more harm than good. So, I mean, what do kids do in kindergarten, 1st grade? They need to see interaction. What kind of long-term damage is that? Has anyone even talked about that stuff? You're just talking about, like, you know, COVID. These kids aren't getting sick with COVID, but they're getting damaged with the masks. And I applaud you for giving them some space.
Thank you. Other comments?
Hey, how you doing? Mike Penzak, 134 Ridgewood Avenue. Just going off of the next steps, has the board decided on, or will the board be deciding on, if they're hiring Olive Branch as a full-time consultant? I know the $25,000 was just paid for the audit. Are they going to continue their process and moving forward, the next steps is hiring them full-time to be the consultant for the district? How long does that contract last for, if there's been any negotiations at that point? Just curious about what the next step is with this particular group. Thanks.
Our agreement with Olive Branch was for the audit.
No, just agreeing with Betsy. We did the audit with Olive Branch. We've used different vendors in the past for professional development. Last year, we had a couple individuals come in, and we were looking at different groups for this year.
Other comments? Okay, there is a second public comment period at the end of the meeting. So those of you who would like to stay will have another opportunity to speak. We'll now continue with the rest of the meeting. I'm sorry? Usually the business portion, we have a number of resolutions tonight, but I would say the business portion will take no more than half an hour and probably less. That's my best guesstimate. Okay, it is not the first meeting of the month, so we will defer our committee and liaison reports unless anyone has something that is time sensitive.
Well, not time sensitive, but I do want to announce that we reached agreement with the administrators on a contract that we're going to be approving under A1, I believe it is. You know, again, it was a longer negotiation than usual, but it was a good negotiation, and obviously our administrators did an unbelievable job during unprecedented and very difficult times, and we thank them for that, and we hope that this contract you know, is in place and will you know, send that message and also you know, be a good basis for us going forward.
Thanks, Michael. Does anyone else have anything that is time sensitive? No? Okay. You have in your packets the minutes from the board meeting of September 13th, executive and regular session minutes. I know that you have all committed them to memory. Does anyone have any additions or deletions, changes to those minutes? Okay, if that's the case, Michael, will you move the minutes?
Yeah, I'll move M1.
Thank you. May I have a second? Second from Anthony. Since there are no changes, Barbara, would you call the roll?
Mr. Bonnet? Aye. Ms. Boyle-Vellucci? Aye. Mr. Campbell? Mr. DeLu?
Aye.
Ms. Gottlieb?
Aye.
Ms. Graham?
Aye.
Ms. St. Auburn?
Aye.
Dr. Yaris Ramos?
Aye.
Ms. Ginsburg?
Aye. Motion carries. We now have some administrative items on your agenda under the A items, including some policies, new policies. Anthony, would you move the administrative items?
I would move A1 and A2 in the minutes.
Okay. May I have a second?
Second.
Second from Jocelyn. Apologies for putting you on the spot. Does anyone have any comments on the administrative items? Okay. Barbara, would you call the roll?
Mr. Bonnet?
Aye.
Ms. Boyle-Vellucci?
Aye.
Mr. DeLu?
Aye.
Ms. Gottlieb?
Aye.
Ms. Graham?
Aye.
Ms. St. Auburn?
Aye.
Dr. Yaris Ramos?
Aye.
Ms. Ginsburg?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We have a number of personnel items. For those who are not familiar with our agendas of late, there is, throughout the state, considerable volatility in personnel, and this is due to COVID. Lots of changes, lots of long-term substitutes, lots of teachers leaving at times when they would not normally do so. It is right now, that is the norm rather than the rule rather than the exception. So with that, Tracy, would you move the personnel items?
Yes, I move P1 through P8, which also includes items on the addendum for P1 and P5.
Okay. May I have a second?
Second.
Second from Heather. In keeping with our rules, personnel items are discussed in executive session. So if there is no comment from the board.
Mr. oh, sorry.
I was just commenting, Betsy, I seconded it, just so you know.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Barbara, I seconded.
Oh, second, I'm sorry.
No problem, we can't tell with the.
So moved by Tracy, seconded by Teresa. Thank you, Teresa. Barbara, would you call the roll?
Mr. Bonnet?
Aye.
Ms. Boyle-Vellucci?
Aye.
Mr. DeLu?
Aye.
Ms. Gottlieb?
Aye.
Ms. Graham?
Aye.
Ms. St. Auburn?
Aye.
Dr. Yaris Ramos?
Aye.
Ms. Ginsburg?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right. Michael, curriculum. Would you move the curriculum item?
I move C1.
Thank you. May I have a second? Second from Heather. Any questions on this recommendation for the sixth grade students to visit the Bueller Challenger Science Center? Okay. Barbara, would you call the roll?
Mr. Bonnet?
Aye.
Ms. Boyle-Vellucci?
Aye.
Mr. DeLu?
Aye.
Ms. Gottlieb?
Aye.
Ms. Graham?
Aye.
Ms. St. Auburn?
Aye.
Dr. Yaris Ramos? Ms. Ginsburg?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right. We have come now to the business items. Duval, would you move the business items?
Yes, I'll move B1 to B4.
Okay. May I have a second?
Second.
Was that Anthony? Or who was? Oh, okay. Seconded by Anthony. Any questions or comments on the board, the business items? Okay, Barbara, would you call the roll?
Mr. Bonnet?
Aye.
Ms. Boyle-Vellucci?
Aye.
Mr. DeLu?
Aye.
Ms. Gottlieb?
Aye.
Ms. Graham?
Aye.
Ms. St. Auburn?
Aye.
Dr. Yaris Ramos?
Aye.
Ms. Ginsburg?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, we've come now to the second public comment period for comments on agenda items or other items pertaining to the running of the schools. The same parameters apply, 2 minutes. You can identify yourself. If you're taking a second turn, you can just identify yourself briefly. So, does anyone have any further comments? I want
I make one final comment since, we get cut off very quickly and we don't really have an opportunity to have a dialogue about any of these topics. So I would like to just state that assumptions shouldn't be made about what people believe and what people think by the positioning of trying to be as objective as possible about this evaluation and the spend of the money. And I also believe that we should really be, I have been involved in this Board of Education. I was a Board of Education member. I've been involved in the school district for some time. I believe that diversity and equity and so-called inclusion is a very important topic. And it is particularly a very important topic as of late because there are many people that feel excluded by these efforts and excluded in a painful and very harmful way, and we're not addressing it. So I do think we need to open up the dialogue, we need to have the discussion, and we need to not make judgments about each other, about what people think when they don't even know you. So it's very clear that we really need to have an open dialogue on this topic. It's a painful and difficult topic for sure, but people are making assumptions all the time about the way people think. And this has been a very politicized topic, and so it is not equitable, it is not fair, it is not empirical, and all I'm asking for is some accountability. This appears on the surface of everything I've seen and participated in that you already had decisions made about what you were going to do, and now this just supports those decisions. I don't feel it was objective. And that's not just me. It's many, many parents that are afraid to come up here behind this podium for fear of being judged.
Thank you. Other comments?
Is this for a time for other issues?
Yes, any issue that pertains to the running of the schools.
I just want to mention that, and again, partly this is on me. This is the first time I even knew there was this diversity committee. I think on this issue, which clearly this evening shows is extremely fraught, I think it's very important that the board do tremendous outreach in forming such committees and in their ongoing meetings. We get a lot of miscellaneous, not mold remediation or pesticide emails that sort of can leave people not looking at what comes from the town and from the Board of Education. It would, at the very least, subject lines that stress what this release is about in a clear way to fully alert at least the parents and anyone else who gets the Board of Education emails would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you. Other comments?
Hi, Vincent Cusimano again. I have another concern. It concerns me when I take High Street going towards Bloomfield Avenue from my house in the morning at about 10 o'clock. I see children, classrooms of children, 2 usually, sitting in the driveway on their towels, okay? I think they're in class with their teachers. There's no security barriers there. And with everything that's going on in this community, I hate to see something happen to these children, okay? Because you don't know, maybe somebody had a bad evening, somebody, goes up on that curb, they could kill, 40 children easily, okay? And so I think some bollards should be set up, or we should develop a park or a small playground on the other side, which is, it seems like the parking lot is huge over there, okay? And if we had some grass area on the other sides, maybe they could sit on grass rather than hot asphalt, which I don't think is healthy for them either, okay? So that's another concern I have.
Thank you. Other comments?
Hi, Phil Johnson, 55 Chestnut Hill Place. I have a senior and a sophomore at the Glen Ridge High School. First of all, thank you for conducting the equity audit. Very much appreciated. I think we all need to learn
and listen and first before we actually act. So I appreciate the thoughts from the board and look forward to the future feedback on what you plan to do next. On a completely separate topic, I'm unfortunate to hear about the water damage at the Ridgewood Avenue School lower gymnasium. Both of our kids played volleyball through a GRAA. Loved doing that, loved doing it as part of the schools. Would ask the board to please consider the opportunity to set up the revised gym floor with volleyball posts and volleyball striping on the floor so that gymnasium could be used for both basketball, other sports, but also volleyball. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Other comments? Other comments? All right, seeing none. I'm sorry.
Good evening. I'm Bernice Clark Bonnet, 163 Linden. I just wanted to make a short comment to thank you for the work that the board is doing on this equity audit. I also encourage, as we all go through the information, to think about the change management. Clearly, that's going to be needed in this town to actually take action. Because as important as going through the information is also thinking about how to affect positive change that will impact all of our children and all of the families who live in this town. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? I don't want to leave anyone out.
Hi, Carol Florzak again. I would be remiss if I did not, on behalf of my HSA colleagues, just kind of share a little perspective in regards to some of the feedback, with regards to the HSA folks having more access to the administrators. And honestly, yes, unless you've done it, very similar to a lot of the volunteers here, this is what we do. I don't think people realize the effort that is put into this. I stopped working almost 2 years ago, and the HSA has now become my full-time job, for which I do not get paid. The reward for me is, I get to have interaction because we are constantly planning events. We are constantly looking at ways that we can support the school and our students. And Dr. Harris has been very giving of her time to do this even outside of work hours. So it is inevitable when you have these interactions with individuals at the school that you will form relationships, and it is easier for me to email her and ask her, hey, did the back to school night Google Meet codes go out because I didn't see them? But I would encourage people, because I have parents coming to me asking me questions, and I would encourage them, email your teacher, email your principal. You don't need to be on the HSA to communicate with them. You can absolutely do that. And then the last thing that I would encourage parents to do is, the more hands we have in the HSA, the less work it is all around. So if you can volunteer in any capacity as a chair, as an HSA board member, my term is up next year. We will be looking for a new president or co-presidents. I would absolutely encourage parents to get involved. So thank you.
Thanks. Other comments? Okay. Seeing none, may I have a motion to adjourn?
Moved.
Moved by Michael. May I have a second? Second from Teresa. Thank you all for coming tonight, and thank you to Dr. Artis has left. Thank